When my daughter-in-law leaned in close right there in her mother's spotless dining room and said, "Tell them again about that scholarship," I felt my throat tighten like somebody had wrapped a ribbon around it and pulled. I could see every face at that table turned toward me, waiting, admiring, expecting, and I knew, in the quietest corner of my mind, that if I opened my mouth, I was about to step off a cliff I'd built myself. My name is Me, and this is the story of how one little lie I told to impress my daughter-in-law's family turned into the biggest lesson of my life, so let me take you back to where it all started. I'm the kind of woman who keeps extra napkins in her purse, not because I'm messy, but because somebody always needs something. I spilled sweet tea at church, a grandbaby's sticky hands, a neighbor's tears. I've lived my whole life like that. Quietly prepared, quietly giving. I'm 60, 2 years old, widowed, and I live in the same modest brick home my husband Earl and I bought when our children were still small enough to fall asleep in the backseat on the way home from the grocery store. The house isn't fancy, but it's sturdy, like me. Earl's been gone 5 years now. Some days I still reach for my phone to call him when something funny happens. Then I remember there's no one on the other end anymore. Just silence. But the Lord kept me standing, and my children helped too. My son, Jordan, is my oldest. He's always been the steady one, the kind of boy who'd hold the door for a stranger and then forget to mention it because to him it wasn't a big deal. And then there's my daughter-in-law, Celeste. Now Celeste is not a bad woman. Let me say that clearly. She's not cruel, she's not wicked, but she is careful, polished. She came into our lives like a pearl, smooth, shining, and just a little hard to hold on to. Jordan met her at a professional networking event. That should tell you something right there. Celeste worked in event planning and brand strategy, and she talked in sentences that sounded like they belonged in a brochure. She had hair that always looked freshly done and nails that never showed a chip, even when she was eating barbecue. When Jordan brought her home for the first time, I cooked my best meal. Fried chicken, greens simmered all day, cornbread, and peach cobbler. I even pulled out my blue ceramic teapot. Earl bought it for me on our 10th anniversary. Celeste smiled politely. She said, "This is lovely," in a tone that made it sound like she was grading the experience. I told myself I was imagining it. Looking back, I should have noticed the first warning sign when she asked Jordan right in front of me if my living room curtains were original or vintage-inspired. Jordan laughed like it was cute, but I heard what she meant. Still, I tried. I really did. Because when your child loves someone, you want to love them too. Or at least you want peace. And for a while we had it. Jordan and Celeste got married in a small ceremony. I paid for the flowers, even though I couldn't really afford it. Earl always said, "Me, don't stretch yourself so thin you snap." But I wanted Jordan's day to be beautiful. Celeste hugged me at the reception, and she whispered, "Thank you for everything." I believed that meant something. Then, about 6 months into their marriage, Celeste started talking about her family, not in an unkind way, just in a way that made it clear her family was a standard, a measuring stick. "My dad is very particular," she'd say. "My mom notices everything," she'd say. "My sister married into a family with a lake house," she'd say, like that was just ordinary weather. And every time she said it, I felt something in me shrink down small, like an old sweater in hot water. It started with an invitation. Celeste came over one Saturday afternoon with a notebook in her hands. Not a cute little spiral notebook either. One of those hardback planners with tabs, like she was about to run a business meeting. She sat at my kitchen table and said, "Me, my parents are hosting a family dinner next weekend. They want to get to know you better." My stomach fluttered. "Well, that's nice," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel, even though they were already clean. "What can I bring?" Celeste blinked like I'd missed the point. "Oh, they have everything covered. They're very good hosts. Then she opened her notebook, and I'm not exaggerating, she started listing things. They'll ask about your background, she said. I sat down slowly. My background, yes, she said, with that calm voice she used when she was trying not to sound like she was telling you what to do. They like to know who they're dealing with. Who they're dealing with. I smiled, but it didn't reach my heart. Well, I'm just me, I said lightly. Born and raised here, worked at the county office for 30 years, raised my kids, loved my husband, still love him. Celeste tapped her pen. That's sweet, she said, and then, but maybe highlight more accomplishments. I felt my face warm. Accomplishments, she nodded. They value education, community standing, legacy. Legacy. I glanced at the wall where Jordan's kindergarten drawing was still pinned up, faded but precious. A stick figure family holding hands under a sun the size of a dinner plate. That was my legacy, but Celeste didn't mean that kind of legacy. She leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. Me, I'm not saying you're not worthy. I'm saying my parents can be judgmental. I don't want them to dismiss you. I sat there a moment, staring at my own table. The table Earl sanded down and refinished himself one summer. The one where my children did homework and ate cereal and learned what it meant to be together. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Embarrassment, not because I'd done wrong, but because I suddenly saw myself through someone else's eyes. Celeste continued, maybe mention you had scholarships, or that you were involved in leadership programs, something like that. I let out a small laugh. Celeste, I didn't have scholarships. I worked. I put myself through community college one class at a time. She smiled politely, but her eyes didn't soften. Right, but sometimes people don't respect that as much. I didn't know what to say, and then she said the sentence that started the whole mess. Just don't make it sound small. I felt my hands go cold because the truth was I'd been trying my whole life not to make it sound small. Not to make myself sound small. I looked at her and said carefully, Are you ashamed of me? Her head snapped up. No, of course not. Then she paused. I just want things to go smoothly. Smoothly, I nodded like I understood. But something inside me cracked quietly. That night, after Celeste left, I stood in my bathroom looking at myself in the mirror. The soft lines on my face, the gray starting to take over my curls, the little crease between my brows from years of worry and prayer. I heard Celeste's voice again, don't make it sound small. And I thought about sitting at that dinner table with her parents, people who noticed everything. And I imagined them hearing my simple life and deciding I wasn't enough. And I'll tell you something I don't like to admit. I got scared, not scared like a child, not scared like danger. Scared like a woman who has spent her whole life holding things together, suddenly worried someone might look at her and see nothing worth admiring. So I did what I thought would protect me. I dressed up the truth, not a big lie at first, just a little polish. I told myself it's not really lying if you've earned the respect in other ways. That's how it starts, doesn't it? The dinner was at Celeste's parents' home across town. A gated neighborhood, curving streets, lawns so perfect they looked ironed. Jordan drove us. Celeste sat in the front seat beside him, telling him which entrance to use, like GPS wasn't enough. I sat in the back, hands folded in my lap, wearing my best navy dress and pearl earrings Earl gave me on our 25th anniversary. When we pulled up, I felt my heart sink just looking at the house. It wasn't a home. It was an estate. White columns, tall windows, a front door that looked like it belonged to a courthouse. Celeste's mother, Marjorie, opened the door before we even rang. She was tall, slim, and dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Soft beige, sweater, gold necklace, smile sharp as a knife. "Me," she said warmly, "so wonderful to finally meet you." Her hug was quick and light, like she was careful not to wrinkle her blouse. Inside, Everything smelled like lemon and expensive candles. The floors shined. The walls had framed art that looked like it cost more than my car. Celeste's father, Richard, greeted me with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't move his eyes. "Jordan tells us you worked for the county," he said. "Interesting." Interesting, like a hobby. Then they introduced me to Celeste's sister, Adriana, and Adriana's husband, who wore a watch big enough to be its own personality. We sat at the dining table, long, polished wood, set with cloth napkins folded like swans. Marjorie poured wine. Celeste's father talked about investments. Adriana mentioned her latest vacation like she was reading a weather report. And then, right as the salad plates were cleared, Marjorie leaned toward me and said, "Mead, dear, tell us about yourself. Celeste says you're a strong woman." Celeste smiled at me from across the table, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was a look that said, *, do it right. *, I swallowed. And I opened my mouth. "Well," I said, voice steady, "I came from humble beginnings, but I was always determined." That part was true. I did very well in school, I continued. I was offered opportunities, scholarships. The word felt heavy in my mouth. Richard lifted his eyebrows. Scholarships. I nodded. Yes, it was a full scholarship opportunity, actually. That was the lie. The fake story, and once it left my lips, it was like the air in the room changed. Marjorie leaned in. Adriana's eyes widened. Even Richard looked impressed. "What school?" Marjorie asked. My heart hammered. "Oh, well, it was a local program tied to a larger university system," I said quickly. "It was competitive." Adriana smiled. "Wow, that's amazing." I felt something shameful and sweet at the same time, approval like warm bread. Like being chosen, so I kept going. I talked about leadership programs. I never attended. I hinted at mentorship. I never had. I made my job at the county sound like I was a major administrator instead of a woman who filed paperwork and made sure people got what they needed. Jordan watched me, confused but quiet. Celeste's smile grew brighter with every sentence. And then, after dessert, when we were all standing in the sitting room, Richard said, I have a friend on the board of a scholarship foundation. It sounds like you were part of something similar. Do you remember the name of the program?" My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might pass out. I felt the room tilt. I could hear the tick of a clock somewhere. I could smell the coffee Marjorie poured. Celeste turned her head slowly toward me. And then she did something I wasn't prepared for. She stepped closer and said, with a little laugh, "Oh, Dad, you're always networking. Me doesn't have to remember every detail." She was saving me. But in that moment, I realized something that made my skin prickle. She knew it wasn't true. And she didn't stop me. She encouraged it because she wasn't protecting me. She was using me. I stood there, smiling like everything was fine, while my insides churned like storm water. And that was just the beginning, because 3 days later, exactly 3:47 p.m., I got a phone call that told me that fake story wasn't going to stay at that dinner table. It was coming back to collect its price. The phone rang while I was folding laundry. The sun was coming through the kitchen window, catching the dust in the air like little floating stars. I remember because I stared at that light while my whole life shifted. I looked at the caller ID. It was Celeste. That wasn't unusual, but something in my chest tightened anyway. I answered, "Hey, honey." Her voice was bright. Too bright. "Hi, are you busy?" "Just folding clothes." "Perfect, so listen," she said quickly. "My dad's friend, Mr. Halston, he's on the board of that scholarship foundation I told you about. He was really impressed by you." My hand stopped moving. "Impressed? Yes," she said, like it was wonderful news, "and he wants to meet you. There's a brunch this Saturday. My parents are hosting, very small, just a few board members." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Celeste, it'll be fine," she said, breezing right past my tone. "You just need to tell your story again, the way you did at dinner. They love that kind of thing." My mouth went dry. "Celeste, I I may have exaggerated some things. There was a pause, just one beat. Then she laughed, not mean but dismissive. Me, everyone exaggerates. It's called presenting yourself well. I gripped the phone tighter. But they are asking for details, names, programs. Celeste's tone cooled slightly. You'll figure it out. Just don't embarrass Jordan. There it was. The little knife, not asterisk don't embarrass yourself asterisk. Not asterisk don't get hurt. Asterisk don't embarrass Jordan. I felt my face burn hot. Why are you doing this? I asked softly. Celeste sighed like I was being difficult. Because my family respects prestige me, and now they respect you. Do you want to ruin that? I stood there, phone in hand, staring at my laundry basket like it was the most important thing in the world. I heard Earl's voice in my head, gentle and plain. Asterisk me, truth doesn't need makeup. Asterisk, but I had already put makeup on it. Thick layers, and now it was running. I said, Celeste, I can't do this. Her voice sharpened. You asterisk can asterisk. You already did. You just need to keep it consistent. I whispered, this is wrong. She replied, cool as ice. What's wrong is making my family think I married into mediocrity. Mediocrity. I could barely breathe. Is that what you think I am? She didn't answer right away. Then she said almost casually, me, don't take it personally. It's just perception. Perception. When we got off the phone, my hands were trembling. I sat down at my kitchen table and pressed my palm to the wood like I could steady myself through it. I wanted to call Jordan. I wanted to tell him everything, but I hesitated because I knew my son. He hated conflict, and he loved Celeste, and I was ashamed, not just of the lie, but of how easy it had been to let it roll off my tongue. How good it had felt when those people looked at me like I mattered. So I did what women like me often do. I tried to fix it quietly, alone. I drove to the library the next morning. I told myself I was just going to research, so I could give them something believable. But deep down, I knew I was digging myself deeper. I sat at a computer and typed in local scholarship programs, leadership initiative, University County. Pages of results. None of it matched the story I'd told. I felt sick. A young librarian walked by and smiled. You finding everything okay? I forced a smile. Just looking up some old programs, old lies. By the time I left, I had printed out information on a foundation that asterisk did asterisk exist. I told myself maybe I could shift my story toward that. Maybe I could gently redirect without getting caught. That's what liars tell themselves. They think they can steer a train already off the tracks. That afternoon, my friend Darlene called. Darlene is the kind of friend every woman needs. She's blunt, but she's loyal. She's been my neighbor for 20 years, and she's seen me at my best and worst. Me, she said, you sound tight, what's going on? And I almost told her. I almost poured the whole thing out like water from a cracked cup. But I didn't. I said, just family stuff. Darlene snorted. Family stuff is never just family stuff. 3 days before the brunch, Celeste came over unannounced. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it, carrying a folder. I made something for you, she said. I stared at the folder. What is that? A little outline, she said, opening it and sliding it across the table. Your story. The scholarship, the leadership program, the county work. I added some impressive details. I felt my stomach twist. Celeste, she raised her hand. Me, please, I'm trying to help you. I flipped through the pages. It looked like a resume, but it wasn't my life. It said I'd graduated with honors. It said I'd been recognized by state officials. It said I'd led community development initiatives. I looked up at her. This isn't me. Celeste's eyes narrowed. It can be. It's just framing. I pushed the folder back. No, her face hardened. Me. My father has already told people about you, about your perseverance. Do you understand what it would look like if you backed out now? I swallowed. It would look like the truth. Celeste leaned forward, voice low. The truth is not always what people respect. Something in me rose up, quiet, steady, and old. I said, Celeste, respect built on lies is not respect. It's a trap. Her lips pressed together. She stood up slowly, like she was done pretending. You know, she said coldly, I tried to make you look good. But if you want to be stubborn, fine. Just don't expect my family to take you seriously after this. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Then they won't take me seriously, I said. But they'll know me. Celeste stared at me, then gave a small, sharp laugh. You're going to regret this, she said. And then she walked out. The second the door shut, I sat down hard in my chair, because for the first time I realized I wasn't just dealing with an awkward dinner conversation. I was dealing with a woman who cared more about image than integrity, and she had already woven my lie into her family's expectations. But what I didn't know was that she'd woven it into something else too, something financial, something legal, something that would hit me where I never expected. But that's not the end of it. 2 days after Celeste stormed out, Jordan came by alone. That alone should have told me trouble was riding shotgun. He stood in my doorway with his hands in his pockets, eyes tired. Mom, he said gently, can we talk? I stepped aside and let him in. Of course, baby. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table his father refinished. He looked around like he was trying to remember what home felt like. Then he said, Celeste told me you embarrassed her. My chest tightened. Is that what she said? Jordan sighed. She said you lied to her family about scholarships and stuff, and now you won't follow through at this brunch. I stared at my son. The son I raised, the son I kissed on scraped knees and prayed over when he had fevers. I said carefully, Jordan, did she tell you she gave me an outline of lies to keep it going? Jordan blinked. An outline? Yes, I said, a folder, a story she wanted me to perform. Jordan rubbed his face. Mom, why did you lie in the first place? That question hit me like a slap. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. I took a breath because I felt small. I admitted. Because I wanted them to look at me like I belonged at that table. Jordan's eyes softened, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. Then he said, Celeste says her dad is offering to connect you to some foundation work. Like board opportunities, and it would look good for us, I repeated quietly. Jordan nodded. It could help with networking, career, maybe even, he hesitated, maybe even property stuff later. I frowned. What do you mean, property stuff? Jordan looked away. Mom, Celeste and I were thinking about buying a bigger house. Her parents offered to help with the down payment if we can show stability, family stability. I stared at him. Family stability, he swallowed. They're big on appearances, and they asked if you had assets. Like if you'd ever consider signing something later, like a family trust, so everything looks organized. I felt the room go quiet around me. A trust, assets, signing something later. I leaned forward slowly. Jordan, I said, voice calm but shaking underneath, has Celeste asked you to get me to sign something? Jordan's face tightened. No, not exactly. It's just they do things differently. They plan, they structure. Structure, that word made my skin crawl now. I stood up and walked to my desk drawer. I pulled out a stack of mail, bills, coupons, church flyers. And then I saw it, a letter I had ignored because I didn't recognize the return address. It had come 2 weeks ago. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was from a financial advising firm, a consultation reminder. It said I had an appointment scheduled, under my name, at Celeste's father's recommendation. I felt dizzy. Jordan stood up behind me. Mom, I held the letter up. Did you know about this? Jordan frowned. No, but his voice sounded uncertain. I sat back down, my heart pounding. That's when I remembered something else. 2 months ago, Celeste had offered to help me organize paperwork. She'd said it was a kindness. She'd sat right here at this table with a laptop, asking me questions about my accounts, my life insurance, my mortgage. At the time, I thought she was just being helpful. Now I felt like I'd been standing in the middle of a con job with my eyes closed. I looked up at Jordan. "Son," I said softly, "I need you to listen to me. Celeste is not just worried about me looking good. She's building a picture, a story, a financial story." Jordan swallowed. "Mom," she wouldn't. I raised my hand. "Jordan, I loved your father, and when he died, I learned something painful. People will smile in your face while they count what you have." Jordan's eyes flickered. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. And that's when I realized the deeper truth. Celeste wasn't just using my lie to impress her family. She was using it to position herself, to make me look like I was part of their legacy, so she could justify reaching into what I had left. And my little fake scholarship story, it was the bait. I felt anger rise in me slow and hot, replacing the shame. How could I have been so blind? I thought. This wasn't a mistake. I realized it was a plan. And that's when I noticed something that changed everything. Jordan had left his phone on my table. It lit up with a message preview from Celeste, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice. It said, "Make sure she doesn't talk to anyone, and do not let her cancel Saturday." I didn't touch Jordan's phone. I didn't need to. That one line told me enough. Celeste wasn't nervous anymore. She was controlling. Jordan picked up his phone a minute later and slid it into his pocket without noticing my face. We talked a little more, circling the truth like two people afraid to name it. When he left, I stood at my kitchen sink and stared out the window for a long time. The sky was pale blue. A bird hopped along my porch railing like the world was simple, but my world wasn't simple anymore. I knew two things. First, I had to clean up my own mess, because I had started this with a lie. Even if Celeste used it, I had handed her the tool. Second, I had to protect myself, not with yelling, not with drama, but with quiet legal strength, so I called Darlene. When she answered, I didn't dance around it. "Darlene," I said, "I need you to come over and bring your common sense." She arrived 20 minutes later, still in her grocery store uniform, hair wrapped in a scarf. She sat down, looked at my face, and said, "All right, spill." So I did. I told her about the dinner, the fake scholarship story, the brunch, the folder, the trust talk, the financial letter. Darlene listened with her arms crossed, eyes narrowing more and more. When I finished, she said, You're not dealing with a misunderstanding. You're dealing with a setup." I swallowed hard. "I know." Darlene leaned forward. "You need a lawyer." I exhaled. "I don't want to blow up Jordan's marriage." Darlene's voice softened, but her eyes stayed fierce. They are blowing it up. You're just finally hearing the noise. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed and thought about Earl, about how he used to say, "You can be kind without being foolish." I realized I had been kind. But I had also been scared, and fear makes women like me do strange things like telling a fake story to earn a seat at a table that was never built for us. The next morning, at exactly 8:13 a.m., I called an attorney recommended by a woman from church. His name was Mr. Lyle Henderson. His voice was calm, steady, and he didn't rush me. When I explained the situation, he asked me, "Have you signed anything recently?" "Power of attorney, beneficiary changes, trust documents." "No," I said quickly. "No, sir." "Good," he replied. "Next question. Do they have access to your accounts, logins, passwords?" My stomach turned. Celeste had helped me organize paperwork. She had sat with my laptop. She had watched me type. I'm not sure," I admitted. "Mr. Henderson said, we're going to make sure today. You will change every password. You will freeze your credit, and you will gather every document you have: bank statements, insurance, property deed." I felt a strange calm settle over me, not because I wasn't scared, but because I finally had a direction. While Celeste thought she was managing me like a project, I was building a shield around myself. And while she was celebrating her little victory, thinking she had turned me into a polished trophy for her family, I was quietly stepping into my power. Little did they know I was 3 steps ahead. The brunch was scheduled for Saturday at 11:00 a.m. By Friday night, I had done everything Mr. Henderson advised. I changed passwords. I called my bank and set up extra security. I placed a fraud alert. I printed statements, and then, just to be safe, I checked something I hadn't checked in years: my life insurance beneficiary. Earl had left me a policy too, just enough to keep me stable. When I logged in, my hands started to shake. Because the beneficiary had been changed, not to Jordan, not to both kids, but to Celeste, I stared at the screen so long my eyes hurt. I whispered, "No, no, no." I called the insurance company immediately. My voice was steady, but my insides were screaming. The representative said, "Yes, ma'am. It looks like this change was processed online about 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks ago. Celeste had been at my table 6 weeks ago. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my ears. I said, "I did not authorize that." The representative paused. "Ma'am, it was done with your login credentials." My mouth went dry. That's when anger fully replaced hurt. This was no longer about embarrassment at a dinner table. This was theft. This was identity abuse. This was betrayal with a smile. I called Mr. Henderson. He answered even though it was after hours. When I told him, his voice sharpened slightly. "Me, that's serious. We're going to document everything. Do not confront her alone. Do not warn her." I swallowed. "What do we do?" he said. "We let her think she's in control, and then we pull the rug out legally." I sat in my quiet house and felt something rise in me, something I hadn't felt since Earl passed. A fierce, clean strength. I thought about all the years I'd been humble, the years I'd let people talk over me, the years I'd smiled to keep the peace, and I realized silence had kept me safe before. But now silence would make me a victim. Celeste had crossed a line, and I had reached my last straw. The next morning, Saturday, I put on my navy dress again. I pinned on my pearls, not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I wanted to remind myself who I was. At 10:42 a.m., Jordan pulled into my driveway to take me to the brunch. Celeste wasn't with him. That was strange. Jordan walked up to my porch and said, "Mom, Celeste said she's meeting us there." I nodded calmly. "All right, baby." As we drove, my phone buzzed with a message from Darlene. "You ready?" It read. I typed back, "I was born ready. I just forgot for a while." Jordan talked about traffic, about the weather. I listened, but my mind was elsewhere, because in my purse, tucked behind my wallet, was a folder Mr. Henderson prepared, and in that folder was the truth. Everything was about to change, and they had no idea it was coming. Marjorie's house looked the same as before, perfect, gleaming, untouchable. But when I stepped inside this time, I didn't feel small. I felt clear. The brunch guests were gathered in the sitting room. Well-dressed men and women with careful smiles. Richard was in the middle of them, laughing too loudly. Celeste appeared from the hallway in a pale blouse and skirt, looking like she'd stepped out of a catalog. She saw me, and her smile widened bright, triumphant. She walked over and kissed my cheek. "Me." She whispered, "Thank you for coming. This means a lot." I looked at her and said softly, "Oh, I'm sure it does." Her eyes flickered, but she kept smiling. Richard clapped his hands. "Everyone," he said, "I want you to meet me. She's an example of perseverance, a scholarship girl who rose up through hard work." There it was again. My lie spoken like a medal. All eyes turned toward me. Celeste's hand rested lightly on my arm, like she was guiding a child. I took a breath, and then I did something that made Celeste's fingers tighten. I told the truth. I smiled at the room and said, "Thank you for the kind words, but I need to correct something before we go any further." The room went quiet. Richard's smile froze. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. Celeste's whisper was sharp. "Me, don't." I kept my voice calm. I didn't have a full scholarship. I worked and took classes one at a time. I was proud of that, but I got scared at dinner. I felt judged, and I tried to sound more impressive. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Richard cleared his throat. Well, that's... I held up my hand gently. I'm not finished. Celeste's face went pale. I continued, but what's more important is this. Someone used that moment of weakness to try to take advantage of me. Now, the room felt like it had lost oxygen. Celeste hissed me stop. I looked at her then, truly looked. And I said evenly, Celeste, you changed my life insurance beneficiary without my permission. A gasp rippled through the room. Marjorie's mouth fell open. What? Richard's face flushed red. That's absurd. Jordan stepped forward confused. Mom, what are you talking about? My heart ached at the hurt in his eyes, but I stayed steady. I opened my purse and pulled out the folder. And right behind me, like the Lord himself had timed it, Mr. Henderson walked in. He wasn't dramatic. Just a man in a suit with calm eyes and a briefcase. He said, Good morning. I'm Lyle Henderson, attorney for me. Richard's voice rose. This is inappropriate, Mr. Henderson replied. What's inappropriate is altering a beneficiary designation using someone else's credentials. Celeste's voice trembled. I didn't. Mr. Henderson opened his briefcase and removed documents. We have records, timestamps, IP logs requested through the insurance company. We also have a fraud report filed. Celeste's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. Jordan stared at her. Celeste, did you do that? Celeste's mouth opened and closed. I was trying to help. I felt a sadness wash over me. Not pity exactly, more like grief for what my son had married. Mr. Henderson continued, additionally, Me is revoking all informal access to her financial accounts and has filed a protective credit alert. Any further attempt to manipulate her finances will be pursued legally. Richard stood up, furious. You can't come into my house. Mr. Henderson's voice stayed calm. This is not a negotiation, sir. This is notice. Marjorie's face went tight, like she was trying to keep her social mask from cracking. Adriana whispered, Oh my God, like she was watching a show. Celeste's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the kind that come from remorse. They were the kind that come from losing. She turned to me and whispered harshly, You're ruining everything. I stared at her and said quietly, No, Celeste, you tried to ruin me. I'm just refusing to be ruined. Jordan looked like he'd been punched. He said, Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? My voice softened, because I was ashamed, and because I didn't want to believe someone you loved would do this. Celeste grabbed Jordan's arm. Jordan, tell them this is insane. Tell them. Jordan pulled away slowly, and that moment watching him separate from her, like a man waking up, was the true climax. Not the brunch, not the lawyer, the truth, because for the first time, Jordan saw Celeste without the polish. He saw the hunger underneath. Richard's voice thundered, Celeste, did you do it? Celeste's chin lifted. We were trying to secure our future. She snapped. You said family legacy matters. You said we needed to align. Marjorie whispered, horrified. You used her insurance. Celeste's voice cracked. It wasn't like she needed it. That's when Jordan spoke, low and stunned. That's my mother. Celeste turned on him. And I'm your wife. Jordan shook his head. A wife doesn't steal from a mother. Silence. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held my dignity like a coat around my shoulders. Mr. Henderson handed Richard a document. This is formal notice, he said. Me's assets are not available for coercion, and any fraud will be prosecuted. Richard's hand shook as he took it. Marjorie sat down hard in her chair, as if her perfect world had tilted. And Celeste looked at me like she hated me. But I didn't hate her back. I felt something else, relief, because I had told the truth, and the truth didn't need makeup. Life didn't become magically easy after that. Jordan and Celeste separated within a month. It wasn't messy in the loud sense, but it was painful in the quiet sense. Jordan moved into a small apartment. He came over on Sundays again, and sometimes he just sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wood like it was the only steady thing left. One evening he said, Mom, I'm sorry I didn't see it. I reached across the table and touched his hand. Baby, I said, love makes us blind sometimes. but it doesn't have to keep us blind. Celeste never apologized to me. Not once. Her parents sent a short note, typed, not handwritten, saying they were disturbed by the events and hoped all parties could move forward. No apology. Just a wish to move on, but here's what mattered. My accounts were secure, my insurance was corrected, my peace was returning, and I learned something powerful. People who thrive on image panic when truth walks into the room. Darlene told everyone at church, of course. She said, Me stood up like a queen. I told her, Darlene, hush. But deep down I was grateful. Because, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't shrinking. I was standing. If you're listening to me right now, maybe you've been in a room where you felt small. Maybe you've dressed up your life with a little extra shine, hoping somebody would finally nod and say you mattered. I'm not here to shame you. I understand, but I learned late but clearly that lies don't protect you. They invite people who are looking for weak spots, and I learned something else too. Silence doesn't mean weakness, but it can become a cage if you use it to hide what's happening to you. Family isn't about blood, and it isn't about marriage certificates either. Family is about who treats you with dignity when nobody's watching. So if you're going through something similar, if someone is pressuring you, using you, trying to rearrange your life for their comfort, please hear me. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to tell the truth. You are allowed to protect what you worked for. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? And remember, every story has a lesson, and yours might be just beginning.